Hello, everyone, and welcome to this special Let's Talk session. Your incoming IAFE President and CEO, David Grindle, CAE. We are recording today's session and we'll make that recording available on the IAFE website, fairsandexpos.com. For those listening in at a later date, please note that this live conversation was held on November 25th, 2024. As always, your participation signifies your approval of the IAFE's use of their recording. During today's session, you will have the opportunity to sit back and relax as our current president and CEO, Marla Calico, CFE, chats with David regarding some topics that mean the most to you, our valued IAFE members. Now, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Marla to kick off this insightful conversation.
Thank you, Miss B. Appreciate it very, very much. We are so excited to see so many faces here on this session today. I know we've got participants from all over the U.S., fairs large and small, and across Canada. So thank you very much for joining in. This is pretty much going to be a conversation between two people who seem to have found kindred spirits and friendship. We've been talking to each other. I think we've logged about 15 or 16 hours over the last
Easily.
3 weeks. And it has
Plus emails galore.
It's been loads of fun. So
Yeah.
our purpose
Yes.
today is to just find out a little bit more about you, David, maybe recap some of the conversations that you and I have had, and kind of just listen in as you and I talk about some things for the future. So, you ready to go?
Sure. I'll
See-
just forget the other 90 people that are listening to
Yeah,
our usual
exactly.
conversation.
Well, I was very intrigued and obviously thrilled to know that you grew up on a farm and a dairy
Did.
farm. So tell us just a little bit about that, what it was like, where it was at, all of those good things.
So I grew up in the northeast corner of Georgia, in between the little towns of Dahlonega and Cleveland. And my great grandfather started farming in that area in the early 1900s. And then it passed down through his sons, and my cousins are still farming that area. We dairy farm. We had about 250 head of dairy cattle, uh, about 8 good-sized houses of laying hens, and then, the bacon we kept around so that we would have pork and other things like that we needed. But yeah, it was definitely a formative bit that really sort of set, no matter where I've worked, set that work ethic that you get when you know, it doesn't matter that you're having dinner. It's time to go pull a calf.
That's exactly right. I know my duties from about the time I could, I think from about the time I was 9 or 10, my duties were the baby calves. I was in charge of bottle feeding, and I had 120 of those suckers to feed at one time. And then driving a tractor, especially when there was
Yep.
nobody else. So what about you? What kind of chores did you have to do?
Oh, so mine was, father always felt it necessary that if he went to the milk barn and got the heat going, I could go out in the woods and start getting the cows headed toward the barn. There was a lot of picking up eggs. And then the eggs, of course, then had to go into all the boxes to be distributed and go out. So, we got in so much trouble with my grandfather one time because we just made the big boxes to put the flats in, and then created this maze through. He was simultaneously proud of us, of course, for building this huge structure and ready to kill us all for
Uh-huh.
putting so many of those boxes together.
Yeah.
But those were the big ones. We didn't bottle feed our calves. We had veal that we had for a long time. So
Mhm.
I learned, get the milk on your fingers, get it in their mouth, and draw their nose down into the bucket
There you
from an
go.
early age.
There you go. There you go. And like you said, I appreciate the fact you do learn. My sister and I were just talking about this weekend. We don't know what it's like to not work because you were on call, you were ready 24/7. So,
Exactly.
yeah.
If it needs to be done, you go do it.
Yeah. Well, hey, I have a question for you. You said
Okay.
Dahlonega. Do you know a
Yeah.
little dive bar in Dahlonega?
So for those of you who know that song, my uncle was one of the owners of the first dive bar in Dahlonega, and now there are multiples, and we're not really sure which one she went to, but it is a true story of the car breaking down and her ending up in a little dive bar in Dahlonega.
I love it. Ashley McBryde is one of my favorite performers of all time.
And to
So.
be fair, I'm reasonably sure because my uncle's bar was sort of on the what was then the outskirts of town, near the college.
Uh-huh.
And chances are she was probably in town more, but that under different ownership and name is that little dive bar still going.
I love it. I love
And
it.
don't forget the other end, if we went to the other town, Cleveland, Georgia, is the home of the Cabbage Patch Kid.
Oh my gosh, who would
So
ever
if you
know that?
grew up, yes, the Cabbage Patch Kid comes from Cleveland, Georgia, where my sister still lives.
All righty. That's great. So thinking about Georgia, and we'll get to this a little bit later. I know you've had some interaction with New York State Fair, but what about in
Yes.
Georgia? When you were growing up, did you go to county fairs at all?
So, we didn't have a lot of county fairs in my part of Georgia. The big place for us was the Georgia Mountains Fair up in
Mm-hmm,
Hiwassee.
mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm,
so we went up there.
mm-hmm.
Where I really grew to appreciate the county fair was living in Indiana.
Ah, yes, yes.
I was a student, much to Ray Allison's joy. I have been a student and a staff member at Indiana University. And so the Monroe County Fair was always a place we went, as students. And then when we moved back and had our kids, the fair was a must do every year.
Mm-hmm.
The boys loved every moment of it. And then, of course, we moved to New York, and I'm 5 miles from the New York State Fair. And we not only went, but then their high school probably 4 or 5 times a year because the New York State Fair does a parade every afternoon. And we were one of the biggest marching bands close by. So we were marching at the fair all the
All
time.
right.
And then
Right.
we're still there because there's quite a bit. I know we do a lot of talk about how to use your facilities year round. And let me tell you, that I have living this close, I have grown to appreciate the use of our fairgrounds.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, before we get into your adult period, we just simply have to touch on the fact that in addition to the dairy farm, you and I also have another similarity
We
in that we
do.
both got involved with music at a very young age, but we took kind
Yeah.
of different paths. Tell us a little bit about your formative years. What was that instrument you were learning to play or that you played?
Well, so I started very early. My grandfather sang in gospel quartets. And
Mhm.
so I learned that if you could sing Jesus Loves Me at the front of the church, they'd give you quarters if you stood at the back. So I was my grandfather started me as a gig musician early. Um, but father, his big thing, my father said if he was going to pay for instrument lessons, he wanted something he wanted to hear. So my first instrument was banjo. I started out on the 5 string banjo. I was in 5th grade, and I was okay, but they wanted to strengthen my fingers, and so they put me on piano. And I'm a much better pianist than I am a banjo player.
Absolutely.
And I went with piano, and I played really well until I met my wife, who has 2 degrees in pipe organ and all keyboard instruments. And I now sound like an elephant wearing mittens compared to when she plays. So um, really,
Oh,
music for me has been music and performance and the support of it. It really is just part of what keeps me ticking, just like you. And
yeah.
you get into it, and some days I just need to think. And if my wife's not in the house, I will sit down and continue to play piano.
Excellent. 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 I don't know that there's a duet in our future. I probably have a couple of books on for 4 hands, but we can have fun.
Warning, I have done some stranger things in my career. We might still work that out, Marla.
Yeah. So you ended up going to school for music, is that correct?
I did. So I was the kid, everybody in your family, I'm the third child. I am grandchild number 6 on my dad's side of the family. I'm down in the 20s somewhere on mom's side. And so all the other family jobs had been taken. I was supposed to be the music minister and high school music teacher.
Aha.
And so everybody just expected I would go to school and get a music degree and be a music teacher because that's what you did. And they put me in my first high school music class, and I drove back to my advisor and said, "Nope, I am not cut out to be a high school music teacher. I don't have the filter. I don't have the patience. I can teach a high school kid anything but music." Um, and but I was well enough into my music degree that I actually um, undergrad I went to the largest undergraduate campus in the world. Berry College in Rome, Georgia, is a college with 26,000 acres of campus.
Oh my goodness gracious.
We have a huge agriculture school.
Hmm.
We still had what what I grew up calling a home economics department.
Hmm.
You know, the greatest gift you could get was to be invited to the home ec house for the big end of semester dinner. Um, but while I was there, Rome, Georgia is halfway between Atlanta and Chattanooga.
Got it.
And so we would often drive the hour and a bit to Chattanooga to supplement the Chattanooga Symphony and Opera Chorus. And that was I had been exposed to opera as a kid in Santa Fe. My aunt and uncle lived there and took me to the Santa Fe Opera.
Mm-hmm.
But the first time I was on stage singing opera was in undergrad.
Uh-huh.
And I loved that, but I loved backstage even more.
Okay.
I loved the logistics. I loved making sure, it's opera. If you don't have 72 uh, wine glasses stacked in a pyramid to push out on stage, you know, is it really even a good scene? And so I fell in love with that and realized that you could have an entire career in stage management.
Uh-huh.
And so I was able to use all of my music degrees because there's not a score I can't read. I am fairly functional in several languages that help with opera. And so that sort of led me into that. And I ended up working as a professional stage manager, which is, as we know, all about keeping a live event going. I, I've had to fire a tiger. I've had elephants and horses that you had to move in and out, and the horses grew up with elephants, but the elephants didn't with horses, and they were all afraid of each other. And I had a lady go into labor on stage one time. Um, I because I mean, where else can you sit there and have an entire conversation about which animals are we going to sacrifice before we kill Samson? What props can we put together?
Oh, that is awesome. That is awesome.
So,
Kind of like a running a fair, I think, in so
well,
many ways.
oh, in so many ways, because everybody wants a stinking animal on stage. And the worst thing you can do is put an animal on stage. I mean, I was doing a production of Aida one time, and the director was convinced that they would have a monkey come out on the holder's shoulders. Well, that was great. But nobody told the monkey that the other two people had boa constrictors. And, there's a term called going ape, and you can fill in the blank.
Uh-huh.
There's a reason I've actually seen a monkey do that because that's what happens when you bring a monkey on stage with two boa constrictors.
Yes. Oh,
So,
the
yes,
stories.
there's the world of opera for you.
There's the stories we're going to share. Well, I know that you and I talked, and not all of your experience was backstage. You had some front of house experience, did you not? Can you tell
I
us a
have
little bit
also
about
done
that?
some
Because I
front of
think the
house.
front of house is interesting.
Well, so with front of house, a lot of times when you're doing large scale music events, your back of house and front of house begin to merge. And so, how do you work? I did a different production of Aida. The one I had to fire the tiger in was in a hockey arena. And so, house management and stage management, because we were in the center of the arena with them, and dealing with animals coming to and fro and things like that. There was a lot of coordination of house management. Where do you put your people and how do we get them out? And egress and emergency egress and all of those things really became a big issue. Then I moved into production management, and suddenly it became a bigger issue because you're coordinating, making sure that all of your lighting is working because everybody wants to do a blackout. Well, yes, but no, because that'll be the moment. Or um, in a multi-use facility, it's never your part of the facility that catches on fire, but you have to deal with it somewhere else, and shut your show down and get them moved out. And it's always on the night of all the people with mobility issues. And
Mhm.
so it's learning that anytime you're dealing with the public gathering for anything, you have to think about everything that could possibly go wrong and be prepared for it, but also be prepared for what is their experience like. From the moment they go and think about buying that ticket. What's their experience on the website? What's their experience in parking? Because if you have a patron who has a horrible time with parking, they show up to your event cranky. Well, if they're pre-cranky, there's nothing you can do sometimes to uncranky them. So how do we go through and work with the psychology of people? One of my favorite things I did in my time after I was full-time stage manager, I taught at Indiana University, and we did a course at Disney talking about producing entertainment in theme parks,
Uh-huh.
and really got into the guest experience,
Uh-huh.
because that's ultimately what it is that each guest is showing up with a different idea of what fun is. You don't really know what they are, but you want to try to meet their expectations and exceed them, all while keeping them safe.
Good. So much of that is going to translate into what the IAFE members do. Now, you also told me that you produced a festival, an outdoor festival, and it had like 18,000 people. What kind of a festival and where was that?
Well, so in Bloomington, Indiana, we would do a 1-day festival for 4th of July.
Oh,
And
okay.
so you brought people in, and I got into it because I was stage managing for the local symphony.
Okay.
And they were sort of the drivers and the arts council that at the time I was on the board of. We became the people driving that. So how do you bring them in? And you've got your children's area, but how do you deal with your lost children? You've got, there was this wonderful idea that you would start with having a calliope, an actual steam powered calliope playing in the children's area. And then all the children would follow the conductor while the symphony was playing. It's called the Entrance of the Gladiators, but nobody knows it by its name. Okay, that's great. And it worked wonderful on paper. Getting that crowd of children to the stage, I think the orchestra, we counted, somebody did keep a clicker, and they played through that piece of music 62 times. And then I was just responsible for keeping the kids safe. How are we getting all those children back to their parents? I asked in the afternoon. Ooh, hadn't considered that. It's like, I'll stick with my musicians. Thank you. But it was great. The only other part with that festival is, of course, we wanted to recognize our veterans.
Mm-hmm.
So the symphony and the chorus would played all the service hymns and sang them. And then someone had the great idea, well, let's ask all of our service people to stand when their hymn is played. Beautiful idea. Loved it. And well, the next year they thought, wouldn't it be great if we got all the new Eagle Scouts to then come on stage with the service flags? I'd rather go fire the tiger again. I've never been so nervous as putting the right service flag on stage with the right hymn. Because if
Mm-hmm.
you send the Navy flag out while the Marine hymn is playing, the biggest, meanest humans you have ever met are all going to hate you.
Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Now, was
So,
this an outside festival or was it in a
uh-uh.
physical?
Oh
Ah,
yeah. So, I became the biggest fan, you know, growing up on a farm. The whole house was silent for the weather report. I went back to being a fan of the weather, and I figured I prayed, I lit candles, I called my friends of different religions and asked them everything you can do to make sure you don't get a rain out on that day. Yeah, big outdoor festival.
Yeah. Well, you're going to enjoy and having Steve Seaver on staff. He's our resident meteorologist, so he will be someone to chat about weather issues about.
I love it. I
Yeah.
love it.
Well, listen, let's get into your experience with associations.
Sure.
In one of our first conversations, I was asking you about that, and you told me that your first association gig, you worked for a trade association that was 50 years old but never had a CEO. What
Correct.
was that like?
Um, it was an adventure. I got to build the job. But it was also an adventure because the president who hired me finished their term 6 weeks later. And the president who followed them really wasn't a fan of having an executive director. They liked the president running everything on a daily basis. And he and I really forged the best relationship, and to this day are still close friends. You know, there was a particular moment we talked constantly, almost definitely weekly, sometimes daily. When problems happened, we would just kind of look at each other and go, okay, let's come up with our solution together and work on this. But I think my favorite was a day he called me and he said, I'm really unhappy. I was in a meeting today and I heard about this new program we're doing in Las Vegas. And he really let me have it because he lived in Las Vegas. And he was like, you're in my backyard. I didn't know anything about this. Da, 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 da. And I said, when the time came, I let him express his frustrations. And I said, sir, I am sorry you don't remember the conversation. I'm not bright, but I'm not stupid. I'm not going to start an event in your backyard. And we had the conversation on this date, and I have the notes here. And I also have the notes that you were leaving the next day to take your wife to Honolulu for a week. So you might not remember. There's a pause, and he goes, well, we're going to have to figure out something because I can't remember shit, apparently. Give my words. And I said, it's okay. We all, but this is how I was really able to lay a partnership and continue that on really through that you know, I think it's why I love stage managing it and being an association executive is because I look at them both a little bit like being a foster parent. In neither case, the show nor the association is my baby. It belongs to the members. But I've been entrusted to care for it, to feed it, to help it grow, to give it the best home I can give it, the leadership, the discipline. But it's the members group, you know, and if the members all of a sudden decide that, you know what, we really want to become a totally different group, I'm like, ooh, I'm here to guide you in that direction. I'm here to take my expertise and tell you what's legal and not legal and ethical and all of those things. But, you know, I love taking care of things like that. You know, it just, it got to be exciting when members would call and a member would have a kernel of a really good idea and we could, you know, expand it out. Or my other favorite one was a member brought me an idea and I actually said to our staff, I think this idea is dreadful and I would rather put a hole in my head than us do this. But it was an idea worth investigating. I just thought it was awful. Well, I was wrong.
Aha.
And it turned into the best thing. It was a program that we entered into a new partnership with another association. Did this together. It got bigger and became a non-dues revenue for both of us, and a service. But you know, the member had I didn't tell the member I thought it was a dreadful idea until after it had been successful a few times, and I thanked them for being persistent.
Mhm.
Because ultimately they were right.
Mhm.
And it was kind of cool to watch it happen, but I'll never forget sitting there going, I would rather gnaw my arm off than pursue this. But this is it. We're going to see if there's some legs here.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that association. It was the United States Institute for Theater Technology. You became the first CEO, and they'd been in existence 50 years. You inherited a staff, what, 10 to 12 members, right?
I inherited, I was staff member number 8 when I was
Oh, 8.
hired,
Okay.
and we had 14 when I left.
Okay. So tell us a little bit, as I understand it, and we haven't really touched on this, you grew the membership, right? In the time you were there, what, 12 years, and you grew the
12 years.
membership? Tell us about what you accomplished with that group in 12 years.
Wow. So membership doubled in 12 years. Um, and part of what we did is we went back and we started listening. Where are your pain points? Where are your challenges? What kind of things do you wish we were teaching? And then we would go out and find the leaders to do it. We went and found some parallel groups. Like theater's one of the last places that does as much sewing, but we'd never really pursued people who worked in that industry. So, we went out and we met with the sewing machine manufacturers, and it took us 2, 3 years, but we got the first one to come. And then everybody else realized maybe this was something smart. So we tried to find the people whose products we were using, but they didn't really realize we were a market.
Mhm.
And USITT was a hybrid in that it had corporate members and individual members. And so we were able to balance and grow back and forth, because when you have a trade show, and our trade show there also pretty much doubled in size. Actually, no, didn't. Went up by almost half. So we went from 200 exhibitors to about 325.
Mhm.
But the trick was show the exhibitor that the market is there, and show the market that the exhibitor is there. And it's a little chicken and egg, as Steve and Kate and the team all know. It's you got to put the numbers somewhere and get somebody to trust you. The other thing that we did is we really became a hands-on organization. You know, um, there's so much that we do that you want to get your hands dirty with it. You want to try the machinery, and so it was really growing. And this will sound familiar to a lot of us. It was really going gangbusters, and then March 2020 happened, and we all, like every other association and every other group, we all punted. All of us who lived in a world of live events. I didn't ask our board. I just walked in one day and announced all of our education was going to be free for the rest of the year. Um, and we did, we took all the conference education because the pandemic was declared 15 days before our 60th annual conference. We did all the education online. We did everything. I mean, we really rolled to just like IAFE had to, and all of our member fairs had to. Um, so when we were coming out of the pandemic, 2022, I didn't realize it was going to be my last conference with USITT before I moved over to SMPTE. But we had made, at the pace we were growing, we had invested and we got a deal on the entire convention floor in Baltimore, which is a massive space. And I was like, oh, this was great, but we just had a pandemic. And so we converted one of the halls into our general session hall. We used a good half of it for the exhibit hall we needed, but then I still had a chunk, and we turned it into the biggest fun hands-on zone We managed to get a welding truck in where you went to welding class in one area and then you went into the truck and you got to weld. We had a rigging zone where you could learn to rig. And, it's people die if you do any of these things wrong.
Mhm.
We had, not on the death chart of things, you could go and learn to paint from some of the best scenic painters in the country. You could go and learn how to do different costuming things and get your hands onto product, which is exactly what our exhibitors wanted, was people getting their hands on the product.
Mhm.
We had no
Mhm.
trouble getting those kinds of things supported. And
Mhm.
to this day, that has continued. That hands-on zone has really continued. And to explode out, we used to do one every year. But that's what people want, that experiential learning in every possible way. Because I think the one thing that COVID did reinforce for us is the idea of death by PowerPoint. So we want to find ways to really engage our learners, get them to break up and connect with one another, and also discover what they might be good and new at.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. So you said you grew to 300 and some exhibitors. About how many attendees did you have at your USITT conference?
So we were floored. We had topped out at 5,000. We were headed past that when the uh, pandemic hit. When we came back, we still came back at just over 4,000, and now I'm giddy because I'm still friends with all these folks. I am giddy to tell you they're now at 6,000 attendees.
Excellent. Excellent. And some of those conventions you produced in places we've been. You've been in Salt Lake City and in Phoenix. And did you also produce a show in Denver where we're going to be next year?
I kept trying to produce a show in Denver,
Okay.
but
Okay.
in my dates, there's a volleyball tournament that kept haunting me. Gisela Fillingham, who I believe is our salesperson for Denver, was my
Yes.
salesperson. And she and I have a long running joke of how much I love to hate volleyball tournaments because I wanted to be in Denver. But there are some other cities that I know that we've been looking at that I've been in,
Hmm.
which are really exciting because that the one great thing about when your conference moves around is it moves it closer to the different members throughout the
Hmm.
country, which makes it much more uh, feasible for them to come. But it also moves it to facilities to get to tour.
Hmm.
And touring facilities is a big part of what we do at our conference here at IAFE. It was a huge part of what we did at USITT and at SMPTE. People want to get out and see these other facilities, and frankly, those facilities love nothing more than to show it off to the
Hmm.
people who appreciate the little details that the public, I don't know, the public doesn't really get excited if you found a new way to handle exit signage, but we do. And that's
Exactly.
really cool.
Hmm. Yeah. Cool. Well, that's great. So let's talk just a little bit about SMPTE because different from USITT, SMPTE was a global association. Is that correct?
Yeah, USITT had members around the world, but SMPTE was really global.
Hmm.
We have had sections in Australia, in across Canada, throughout the US, the UK, Germany, Poland, and we were building one in India when I left.
Hmm.
So what's interesting, I look at the parallels there. The industry is vastly different. My colleagues in India, we used to laugh. They would stress test a technology on 30 million people. Right. 30 million was a stress test. Here, 30 million is an extraordinary audience.
Uh-huh.
And there it was invitation only. So, you got to you learned some differences. Our big members in Australia,
Hmm.
and Australia, our Oceania section, it was really cool to get down there and work with them, and learn, as we know in IAFE, the things that are similar to things that are different,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
how you deal with that. And Um, but at the same time, so many of the problems were similar,
Yes. Yes.
and so that was a big plus anytime we would work together. The thing I think I also enjoyed, like, just because I've spent so many years at USITT, I keep going back. Um, we had in Europe, rigging is motorized and standardized. In America, it is not. And we got this fabulous point and counterpoint set of articles going in our journal, each talking about the benefits and drawbacks of the two systems.
Mhm.
And so that's one of the things you can do when you've got membership like this is you look at here's how we deal with it here, here's how we deal with it here. Either are perfect, but here's what's good and bad about both. And having that conversation really gets people to think differently, I think.
Mhm. Yeah,
And we can
good.
even do that even domestically.
Mhm.
The way
Yes.
we have to do stuff in one part of the country is vastly different from the way we have to deal with it for any number of reasons.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. Well, one of the things that, and I think Jeremy emphasized it in one of his messages, is that you, just like there are quite a few of us in our IAFE that hold certified fair executive, which comes with with some cachet, you hold a certified association executive credential. Most people, if you've heard me talk about this, you say there's an association for everything, including an association for association
Association.
executives. And so ASAE, to which I belong, has a very prestigious certified association executive program. And I know about it because I've looked at what's required. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what it takes to get a CAE, and importantly, what it takes to keep it,
Keep
because
it.
you just don't do it once.
No. So the CAE, this was something I did for myself. Having never been an association executive, I wanted to tell myself I really had learned what I was doing. And I got into this, and it has 8 domains with subdomains in them. So knowing that you were going to ask about this, just to give you an idea, the domains are governance, um, with 3 subdomains, executive leadership with 4 subdomains, organizational leadership with 3, association operations with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 subdomains, business development with 5, member and stakeholder engagement and management with 4, advocacy with 3, and marketing and communications with 4. And so you have to go through, you have to have X amount of continuing ed to even take the exam. Um, and then when you sit for it, um, it's brutal. I did a 2-day intensive prep course where they teach you how to really understand the way they ask the questions, because they will ask you for the best answer. And that's a challenge because, as you know, with IAFE and the IAFE Foundation, the rules for 501c6s are slightly different for the rules for 501c3s. And then all the other 501c, of which I think there are 27 up.
7.
Um, you have to begin to understand this and really play into that. And so I sat for the exam for the first time in 2015, and it's 3 hours to do 400 questions, all scenario based. And this Scantron out, and then it all goes in, and the proctor takes it, and it goes away, and you sit and wait. And I'll never forget, I was in a meeting in my office, and an envelope got slid under the door because everyone knew it was the week I was supposed to find out. And I yelled with excitement because I never want to take that exam ever, 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 ever again. And so to maintain your CAE, it's valid for 3 years, and you have to have 40 hours of continuing ed in um, across these 8 domains.
Mm.
And so there are different places. I do it online. I do it through, there's a group of association leaders that I participate in as often as possible at the beginning of every month. And then there are conferences that you can go to. So, like I'm going to the Expo, or as I refer to it, the trade show, because it's one of my favorite places to pick up continuing ed. And Steve and Kate have talked about this. I'm hoping that maybe we can all do it next year. ASAE has a conference, and then there's some continuing ed. Like there's a marvelous continuing ed that I want to talk to the board about that is about this CEO and board chair relationship and how they work together to build that partnership and lead. Um, so those are the kinds of fun things, and ASAE and IAEE, the International Association of Exhibitions and Events. What I love is they have continuing ed for all of our staff. So that's really exciting to me to be able to share those opportunities out with them.
Excellent, excellent. That is fabulous. And I know just our experience with our Kate Turner getting her CMP, very
That is
similar.
another bear of certification.
Yeah,
Oh my goodness.
and the studying, the continuing ed that she has to do, it takes a lot of dedication to do that. And you do it, as you said, for personal development, but you do it so that you can do the best job for your members. And that
Absolutely.
is at the heart of it. So congratulations for that. And thank you. Thank you for doing that. That's going to be great. Now, you mentioned one of the domains was advocacy, and Jeremy and the search committee stated that based upon a survey of our members, which we had a healthy response,
Yes, you did.
their desire for leadership and advocacy for the industry, for the association, was top notch. So can you tell us a little bit about your experience in advocacy and any thoughts about what you maybe see at this point going forward? That's maybe a little premature to ask that, but I'll toss it out.
Well, no, but you've given me a really great foundation on some of the things I need to see. So, the interesting thing is legally a 501c3 cannot spend more than an insignificant amount of money on lobbying efforts.
Mhm.
That's what the law says. The problem is nobody defines insignificant. And so most 501c3s really try to stay out of lobbying. And there's a beautiful legal knife edge that we have to walk between education and lobbying. And we can educate people all day long. I can give you information on things. I can tell you about the financial impact. I can do all of this, as opposed to, I really need you to support and vote on this in this way. And so I've never been able to cross that line. And to be honest with you, I'm really kind of excited to be able to finally stick my toe across that line, because I have felt those tires really near my toes in my career. But I think that for example, the challenge always is that you've got to be able to express the needs of our industry in 102 different ways. Because, and actually even more than that, because that's only assuming the state and the federal, and we all know that we also have to deal with local. And then you have to, who's in power? You have to be able to express, because our needs don't change. Regardless of who wins an election, our needs are the same. So how do we express them to that person in a way to get them to see what we need them to see? As an example that I point out, I for SMPTE, I was asked to testify before the New York City New York City Council Committee on Technology and Entertainment. And it was 2 committees meeting together. And I had gone in because we were really wanting to make them aware of technology advances in virtual stages, which allow you to build a stage that's basically a whole bunch of LED screens including the floor, the ceiling, the everything. And if you invest in that, it can be used to bring a lot of production into a facility. And if you have a commercial and you want it to be set in 8 different cities, you can shoot it all at once, but you'd use 8 different backgrounds.
Mhm.
So I went in really prepared to talk about that. And everyone before me was there to complain because of the number of television shows that were shutting down their neighborhoods. Because the worst thing in the world that can ever happen to you if you live in a neighborhood in New York is for a popular television show to have a character live in your neighborhood. Because it means they shut down filming all the time. And for God's sakes, we're on how many decades of Law and Order? Every neighborhood's had a dead body in it by now.
Yeah.
But there's still some neighborhoods where those characters have lived for years and they get shut down. And in the midst of listening to all of this, I changed the entire presentation. Instead of talking about how many jobs solely that this kind of production would create, I started talking about how many different ways it would draw having to be on the street and make their constituents parking easier. Because I listened to what other people's problems were and I made our problems help solve their problems. And that's what you have to do to be a good advocate, I think.
Yeah.
I will say the great joy of being engaged in the association industry is I reached out to several friends who run 501c6s and really have had some conversations, and they've given me fabulous resources that we can sit down and talk with the board and the membership and say, is this the direction we want to go? We don't have to cut it out of whole cloth. We can base it off of some patterns, which
Good.
always better to
So now you need to learn what we talk about amongst fairs, right? We talk sometimes about stealing ideas, but we don't steal ideas.
we don't.
We use pre-tested ideas and then customize to make our own. Or as somebody would say, it's R&D.
Correct. You have done the R&D, and I'm now taking the product and R&Ding it some more.
A little bit more. Excellent. Well, I know I want to keep an eye on the time because there's about three more things I'd like to touch on before we let everyone go. So again, as Brittany said, we're recording this on November 5th. It's Monday. Our Kate Turner.
25th. November 25th.
Oh, yeah.
I know it's conference week. I'm proud we can say Monday.
Yes, our Kate Turner's already on a plane headed to Phoenix. Steve leaves in the morning. I leave tomorrow night, and then we just putter our way out there so that we're going to get there. So you're going to be with us. You're going to be with us starting on Saturday all the way through the end.
Absolutely.
You're going to be walking the halls. What do you expect to do and accomplish while you're there?
I want to meet and talk to people. An association is its members, and the needs of the association. You guys have been so gracious giving me information. Everyone has, and Marla, you and I have talked through a lot of the why. Why do we do this? Why is this a concern? Why is this a challenge? And so that's a huge leap forward for me to begin to understand those needs. But I really want to get out there and begin to build a relationship with our members.
Good.
Because as you well know, that's the heart of it. That's really the heart, because if we build that relationship, they realize the truth. The reason we do our jobs is because we care about what it is this association does for the membership.
Absolutely.
And so getting out to meet people from all geographies, from all size fairs. I mean, again, when you grow up in between two towns of less than 10,000 people, your heart gets stuck with your small town. And the people who tell me honestly, these are the challenges I face. This is what I wish we did at IAFE. Why do you keep doing that? can't promise that everybody's problems will be solved, as you well know, but at least they will be heard so
Mhm.
that we can begin to continue the path. That's the beauty is uh, learning people, but being able to build on something. I'm not having to come in and say, oh my gosh, this organization is a hot mess. It's not. It's in great shape. And that's due to all of you who have given so many countless hours, both paid and unpaid. Because let's face it, most of our volunteers are really just unpaid staff in some respects
Exactly
for
right.
the amount of time and effort and energy they put to things.
That's exactly
Um,
right. Well, I know you and I have also talked about education, and I know you've got a list. What are you going to try to, what sessions are you going to try to sit in on?
so there's sessions on safety. There's coming from the live event world. I want to hear what the different challenges are.
Mhm,
There's some sessions on uh, things that small fairs have discovered and how to scale it up
mhm,
that I'm really excited about. The I'm spending Thursday
mhm,
uh, doing the E. coli course.
uh-huh,
You know, because it those are the kinds of things that I need to be conversant in for our members.
mhm.
But I also need to be able, as you and I have talked, that's a great opportunity for us to share that education with other people who could use it.
Absolutely.
And so
Absolutely.
by knowing what these things are, um, I've got the opportunity to then continue the work that's been done to reach out and try to market it to some other folks. I
Mhm.
think the other place I really want to spend some time is in the trade show and know who our vendors are, know who many of them our associate members are, and begin to get a flavor of that because Kate and Steve and I have already had some brief conversations about what are the ideas for the future. You know, the fact is, um, all of our members know that you really kind of need something new every year to bring people back to the fair. Well, what are the new things we can start plotting for and new ideas? And having fresh eyes is a great opportunity. And I only get that opportunity really twice.
Mhm. Yes. Yeah,
And
that's
then
exactly
my
right.
eyes become as used to it as everyone else's.
Mhm. Good. Good. That's fantastic. Well, as we've said, you and I've had some really great conversations. I think we've covered a lot of territory. We've got the rest of December, as long as I'm still sitting in the big desk, and then I'm going to transition to my old office in the little office for about 2 more weeks to help you. So, what is it that you think as the most important things that you and I can accomplish in this handoff so that we meet the needs of our members and our staff?
Sure. Well, I want to be clear that chair is yours until midnight on the 31st of December, because I've got all that learning time to get ready. Um, I think the biggest thing that we can go through is making sure that I can take what I hear from our members and you and I begin to play that back and forth and me say, so I heard this, and this. And you go, yes, because as much as we are spending time with each other to pass off information, there may be things that neither of us think about that suddenly to someone else could really spark a fire and an interest. And so I want to be able to have that moment to pick your brain of, what's the history behind.
Mhm.
We're going into um, a really interesting time because I think what did we figure out? A, a little more than a third of the board is brand new.
A third of the board and 20% of the executive committee will be brand new.
And so, how do I? There are many things that I can bring to that group from my history of working with other boards and continue working with that. And Ken and I have already begun some of those conversations. But also, then what else do I need to know? What I'm not a person who believes that you walk in, you just start changing things because that's silly because things happen for a reason. And so in the process, if there is something, I want to be able to sit down with you or with other staff members or whomever and be able to say, so we do it this way. What if we made a tweak? What are the down the line effects that are going to happen? You know, I'm reading right now the new book that's out on the Space Shuttle Challenger. And I am a huge reader of many different things, but it's fascinating to go back and realize that the choice that led to that engineering disaster was actually made in 1977. And the one thing you learn is that when you bring an idea to the table, you've got to bring it to the table and ask everyone else to pick it apart and see what's going to happen if we bring that in. Because each of us individually knows a little bit of the story, even when we've all been here for differing numbers of years, and we each bring different perspectives. And so that's what I really want to do. You know, my big thing I said to the executive committee was really that I want to spend the first 3 months I have with them really digging in and learning. And I'm going to be like a 3-year-old, and the staff and many of the members are going, why, why? And I'm not asking why as to why, but give me the history. Tell me why we do things. What does that serve people? Because then we can sit down when we meet together again as a board in April and say, okay, here's where we think everyone's had an opportunity to put in where we think the challenges lie and where we think the opportunities lie.
Excellent.
The best idea may come from the member who joined this year and it's their first conference, and it may come from our longest serving member, and it may be a blend of the two, but let's bring all of those together.
Excellent.
So, yeah, Marla, I think for our time together, I'm just going to be that 3-year-old.
And I will be the patient. I will be the patient adult to answer your questions. I guarantee.
Right down to that bottle of wine I give you on your last day so that you can start recovering from all the wines.
Well, our time is coming to an end, and I want to tell you, and I want to tell everybody on this call that it truly has been wonderful to spend time with David. We've had a lot of laughs and have enjoyed our time together. I know in my heart that you are going to enjoy working with David. And David, I just want to let you know that I appreciate your enthusiasm for this job and how you're coming into it. I can't wait for our members to get to know you, and we know you'll get to see several hundred of them this coming weekend, and then you'll meet the other several thousand over the course of the next few months. So any parting thoughts before Brittany cuts us off?
Just a huge thank you. Thank you to all of you who took time to listen to Marla and I yak at each other. But especially to Marla, you know, when you come in and you are taking a position, I was asked recently how I felt about replacing Marla, and I said, I'm not replacing her because that's impossible. I think it's impossible for one person to replace another. I will never bring to this what you have brought to this. I bring a different thing. But the great part is that we both bring a love for the association, a love for the members, that when that stays the center of that, it makes the handoff so much nicer. And I really want to say thank you, to the entire staff that I've had time to interact with, some of whom I've not gotten that chance yet, but I'm looking forward to it. And so you'll hear me say it a bajillion times, and I really don't want it to sound trite, but gosh, thank you for this opportunity and for making it really as exciting as it is.
You are more than welcome, and I can't wait to meet you in person in just
Here,
4
here.
days. Yes, So everyone, thank you so much for joining us today and listening in. I hope you're as excited as I am. And Brittany is going to post this up after we're all done when the recording has been perfected so that our other friends can listen to it. For all of you traveling to Phoenix, be safe on your way. Happy Thanksgiving.
Please.
Enjoy your time. For our Canadian friends, just take it as another good day in the office. And we will look forward to seeing you all out there. Thank you all very much.
Take
Bye-bye.
care, everyone.
Takes a while for everybody to say goodbye.
It does.